Hello and welcome to Diminishing Returns. I'm one of your co-hosts, Calvin, and with me, as always on this podcast, are Alan.
Hello.
And Sol.
Hello.
And
it's the end of an era. Oh, sorry.
The end of an era. I was about to say it's the ongoing saga of how we try to tie a podcast about a Bond film into the release of the new Bond film, and then they just keep pushing it back.
Yeah.
At least we're recording this one after it was postponed.
Yes.
So
this is a sort of consolation prize for everyone involved.
We'll probably work our way through the entire Craig life saga before we get to the actual last film. There you go.
Well, that's what I'm hoping for, because then Sol can watch it and know what's going on. What was the end of the era that you were referring to, Sol? The end of the Pierce Brosnan era, presumably?
Yeah.
Well, the end of the classic Bond era, isn't it? My understanding is that they reboot quite firmly the franchise continuity after this film, going into Casino Royale. So, it's kind of a line in the sand, isn't it? But arguably everything from Doctor No through to Die Another Day is set in the same continuity.
Yep, correct. You finally admitted it. There's no code name.
Well, no, it's all set in the same universe. I'm not saying it's the same.
It's all different times.
Yeah.
How could he be the same age in the 60s as he was in 2002? It made all sense. I noticed that this was the 40th anniversary, and it's the 20th film, right?
Yep.
So they're averaging a film every 2 years. So presumably that means Daniel Craig has made 9 films now?
Yeah.
Okay.
No. But this was a big deal in 2002, particularly for me. This was the first one that, as a Bond fan, was the new one for me, like building up to and magazines coming out and all these kinds of things. So it was one that I was very excited to see. Do you guys have any memories of this one?
Well, I was going to say, is your perception that this was a big deal back in 2002, just in mainstream terms?
Yeah. Do you not share that opinion?
Well, I don't know. I was alive in 2002. I went to see this in the cinema. I don't really remember it being that big a deal, but I guess it just wasn't something that interested me. I remember the song.
I remember it. I would have been 18. As far as I recall, I went to see it with my brother. Possibly the only film we've ever seen together in a cinema, because it's not something we did as a thing. But he must have been. It must have been just after he'd moved back up to the north. Anyway, the point is we went, and I haven't seen it since. But for the last 18 years, whenever anyone's asked me what's the worst film ever made, I have put Die Another Day on that list. It's maybe not the number one, but it's definitely in the reckoning.
Yeah, well, I wanted to ask you about this, Calvin, because my understanding, my concept of Die Another Day in my head has always been that it is universally regarded as an abysmal piece of shit and the worst James Bond movie. But I didn't really get that vibe rewatching it last night for the first time since it came out in the cinema, and I went and looked at the IMDb score and the Rotten Tomatoes score and so on, and it didn't seem quite that clear cut to me. As the Bond expert, can you kind of tell us where it stands? How is it revered or regarded?
It's still regarded as being one of the worst, definitely. I think that at the time, I remember it got fairly decent reviews at the time. Like, no one was dogging on it in 2002. I think that since the Craig era came along, that kind of made people look back. Like, what we'll get next time we look at a Bond film is going to be a very stark difference to what we have here. And I think that...
I do have to take some degree of issue with you there, Kevin, because as I say, I looked it up on Rotten Tomatoes last night after I watched it, and people definitely were dogging on it back in 2002, but they were dogging on The World Is Not Enough, and what's the other one that came after Goldeneye?
Tomorrow Never Dies.
Tomorrow Never Dies, yeah. They were dogging on both of those, roughly the same amount. They've all got about 40% on Rotten Tomatoes, 40 to 50%.
But this one has tsunami windsurfing, invisible cars, all that kind of stuff. Like, Pierce Brosnan himself...
A Madonna cameo.
Well, yeah, Pierce Brosnan himself can't remember Tomorrow Never Dies and The World Is Not Enough, which one was which. But this one has enough kind of... For the kinds of people who maybe see them once at the cinema and then maybe catch half of them on TV, this one has all of the stuff that people can point to and roll their eyes and like, oh God, wasn't that silly? Whereas I don't know if Tomorrow Never Dies and The World Is Not Enough have that.
Well, interestingly, obviously, I've watched this again, and it would have been hard to meet those low expectations that I had. And bear in mind now, we have over the course of the last few years, I've revisited the Bond franchise, obviously, with you guys, and I've watched the previous 19 films. I think that's worn me down. My bar has lowered, my expectations have lowered, and that has affected the way that I watched this film.
I had the exact same experience. I hated this film. Rewatching it, it's not nearly as bad as I thought. It's just that James Bond in general is shit.
Yeah. Well, Calvin has no response to that, obviously.
No,
because there's just no defense.
There's no point. There's no point at this stage. Like, I've given up all hope of a full conversion. Maybe the Daniel Craig era will bring that.
It's the last hope you've got. Yeah. Definitely.
Well, okay, like, I'll put my cards on the table as well. This is not one of my favourite ones in the series. There are a couple of Daniel Craig ones coming up that I take more issue with and dislike more as a result. But on a more conceptual level, there's a lot of... Well, we'll get into it, actually. Shall we start talking about the scenes?
Well, what I wanted to bring up straight away was the fact that we have not only an extremely long pre-credit sequence, but it's one that establishes our actual plot, our villains. We continue it through the credit sequence, and there's a direct continuity to what comes after, which is, as far as I'm concerned, quite unusual. Usually that pre-credit sequence is a sort of separate thing, just setting up a bit of action, perhaps establishes something from the plot. Calvin, how often do we see the main villain of the film set up in a pre-credit sequence?
That is a good question. Not often, I don't think. The twist here is, of course, that we're not supposed to think that the main villain is being set up in the pre-credit sequence. It's certainly the first time that the sort of story, the narrative, has continued to be told through the title sequence, while the Madonna song in this case, plays.
Well, we do establish, of course, the Soviet Union has been collapsed for about 10 years now, so we have to move on. North Korea now, the world's baddies. You can slag off North Korea without them getting offended because they won't watch it. So it's all right.
Which is, well, even then, it's still sort of like, it's like, you know, obviously it's people affiliated with the state, but it is kind of like a rogue operative within the state itself. Gustav Graves, and it ends up being Gustav Graves, which is similar to... You know, it's never the Russian government that are the bad guys necessarily. It's always like a third entity that just so happens to be comprised of a load of Russians.
You got to play a little bit careful with the global politics.
One day, North Korea might be a free country, and they might want to show this film in their cinemas because they'll be catching up on all the things that they missed.
Yeah. Plus, can you imagine the shitstorm if North Korea hacked Eon Productions' emails? All the discussion of why they can't have a black James Bond would be PR suicide to the point that the franchise would just have to shut down for 5 years. I think.
Some of those emails. Barbara Broccoli slagging off Idris Elba. Yeah, dear. So one of the things we deal with here is obviously they go into the demilitarized zone, which is all loads of minefield, but they're on hovercrafts. So those don't set off the landmines. Now, I am no expert in physics, but I am aware of Newton's third law. Now, I'm not sure exactly how hovercrafts work, but in order to lift them up, you have to push down with an equal amount of force to lift them out.
Yes, what I will say in their defense there is that force would typically be focused in on 4 wheels, and here it's spread out across the entirety of the hovercraft, so maybe it's not quite as severe.
But a landmine would go off with a person's body weight on it.
That's a very good point. I think this whole scene felt very like, is this the best you could do? Because the whole point of a hovercraft is that it's an aquatic vehicle and it can travel on land or on water. Whereas here,
or through Venice,
we just sort of see it, or through Venice. Here we just see it drive over some mud, which is kind of their compromise, I suppose.
Yeah, it could have been a Jeep, like it could have been a Land Rover or whatever.
Yeah, and it was just a long stretch of muddy road, and And even then, like, a guy shoots a flamethrower, quotes at James Bond, but what it actually means is he shoots it off to the left several meters in front of him so that there's some flames on the floor around the sides of the path he's going to drive through. It's just... I thought this opening action scene was abysmal until the point that James Bond jumped over onto a hovercraft, and then it became a sort of fist fight on the hovercraft. And then it actually picked up for me. I actually quite started to enjoy it. I don't know what it was, but at that point it became kind of a good campy fist fight.
That is literally the last 30 seconds of the sequence. That's literally as they're approaching the bell.
I liked it when he hit the bell. Yeah, that was the bell end of the scene. That was the best bit. But yeah,
Saved by the bell.
I must say, and this isn't, there's a lot of it in this opening sequence, but it's throughout the film. I was amazed to see a big Hollywood film from 2002 still making heavy use of speeding up footage to try, because it's not fast enough, because things aren't moving quickly enough. Yeah. It looks terrible, and
it is very practical effects. A lot of that, because even some of the explosions and stuff, it was like, oh, that looks like a kind of 1/12 scale model being blown up.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Like, when the hovercraft goes over the edge and lands, at the bottom, it's all model stuff. And, I mean, I like physical effects, so I don't mind it, but it's obviously taking you out of the realism of the moment.
It does date it as well, though, doesn't it?
Yeah. And next time in Casino Royale, we're going to see some model stuff done impeccably well. Like, I think, when I found out it was model stuff, I was like, oh, wow, that's really impressive. Again, I think the leap that they take the next time is pretty great, all things considered.
Can I ask a question about Bond in general, Calvin? Because this comes up in this opening scene where he turns up, he's undercover, he's pretending to be someone else that he's taken the place of. And, someone takes a picture of him, sends it to the files and goes like, oh yeah, that's James Bond, he's an undercover agent. Like, do they ever address the fact that James Bond is like the most famous secret agent in the world?
Well,
and everyone just knows who he is, and it's ridiculous.
Well, the person who sent the confidential MI6
turns out to
security
be an insider. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So yes,
so
that's
that makes
what
more
that's.
sense. But he is oft like, he doesn't even give a fake name most of the time. He says he's James Bond all the time. Why don't
he
they?
Doesn't here.
That's because they are expecting a very specific person. But usually. I don't know, it just seems like, why not just... I think it's something I've talked about before. I wish they embraced more of him kind of being undercover and playing a character and using a fake name and a bit of fake personality and acting and stuff. Like when Sean Connery is an ornithologist.
Yeah, or like Sherlock Holmes did in every classic Sherlock Holmes movie. Yeah.
Because that's when we end up with Japanese Bond, damn it. That's what happens when...
and the world is much richer.
The world is not enough for Japanese Bond. Yeah. So that first scene, so what we do set up is what we assume is going to be our villain, it seems, who is Zhao, who's like one of the bad guys, and he gets blown up with diamonds in his face.
And he never thinks to remove those diamonds, even though doing so would be very, very easy, really.
Yeah,
it's not like they're, it's not like if he takes them out, then he's gonna bleed to death, or
they're visible. They must be quite surface.
Yeah. It feels like there's a cut scene where he specifically says he wants to keep his scar. It feels like there's a cut scene where he talks about that Japanese art of repairing vases with gold to make the cracks more beautiful than the vases were before, or something like that. But
I like that.
It's just an odd detail in the film.
It's them trying to do a villainous henchman with some kind of unique physical feature like Jaws with his teeth. It's them trying to do that. But the thing is, we don't see Jaws get them installed, which obviously, if he just exists with it, it's like, okay, well, whatever, that's his thing. But seeing the origins of that is quite odd.
It's them trying to hack their way into giving a character some personality without actually having to write it. Because he is otherwise the blandest, most uninteresting character
Well, of course,
even by the James Bond standards.
Ultimately, he
not
proves to
uninteresting.
be a goon. He's a henchman.
Yeah,
But,
exactly.
It feels like he's going to be the villain at this point.
Well, this whole opening sequence is just fucking bullshit, pointless, waste of time anyway, isn't it? Because James Bond, he has a big action fight, he wins, he, beats the bad guys. Yeah, he's done it. And then he's just immediately captured and thrown in a torture pit.
Well, that's why it's the pre-credit sequence.
That's a new thing, and I think, obviously, they don't do anything with it because this is Die Another Day, but I think there is something to be had with that in concept, like an agent like James Bond being captured and put away for months, but this film doesn't.
But like you say,
it
doesn't go anywhere. When it started, I thought, oh, this is interesting. We're gonna have this beardy castaway James Bond, are we? Okay, he's gonna be dealing with some PTSD. And
that kind of 1,000-yard stare, a really personal vendetta. But no, it doesn't. At first, so let's jump into the credit sequence because that's the next bit we get. He's captured basically at the end of this pre-credit sequence.
Yeah, so he's getting tortured in a hole with a load of scorpions, and that means that they can have loads of scorpions in the opening titles, even though I don't think they come up again in the film at all. Now, the song. Would I be right, Calvin, in thinking this is generally regarded as, if not the worst James Bond theme of all time, the second worst one after the White Stripes?
I don't think it's looked upon that badly anymore.
Okay, because I'll be honest, it's not something I would ever choose to listen to on its own, but I think in the context of a James Bond opening titles, I thought it was great. I thought it was completely of its era, but it was evoking enough about Bond, but unique and catchy. I loved the visual thing. We mocked the previous film for having kind of PlayStation 2 graphics level CGI in its opening titles. I guess enough time has passed between that film and this one, because the CGI is, it's not great, but it's respectable now. And you get these ice and lava body figures and things, and I just thought visually, not only is it furthering the story, as we say, we kind of see Bond getting tortured and it's playing into that, but just visually it's unique. These ice and lava people are something we haven't really seen before, but it's very much of Bond with silhouette and so on, and the music. I loved it. I thought it was great. It might be my favourite James Bond opening titles to date.
Oh wow.
I'm okay with that. I thought the song was a bit crap, but yeah, it's just of its time and nothing.
I like the song.
Jerky for my taste.
I'm gonna wake up, yes and no. I'm gonna kiss some part of. I'm gonna keep this secret. I'm gonna close my body now.
I like that jerky. Yeah,
it is like a Madonna song that it's not like I'm sure that it went sort of like, okay, we will just use whatever you give us. Like, we're not going to use because she is like one of the biggest, particularly at the time as well. Like one of the biggest names. Like I think probably up with Adele, Sam Smith. Tina Turner, I guess. She's definitely one of the bigger names. It's like them, getting Elton John to do one or something.
Look, I mean, I know I'm a bit out of touch with modern music, but is Sam Smith up there with Madonna back in
maybe
the 90s?
not.
Is that accurate?
Maybe not. Adele certainly is.
Is she? I mean, even Adele, I'd say Madonna in the 90s and the 80s was like Lady Gaga level now, and I wouldn't put Adele quite up there. But anyway, I've spoken before about the Billie Eilish song for No Time to Die, and my major complaint with that song is that it isn't really much of a Billie Eilish song. It's just a kind of James Bond song that she's singing, and it just kind of begs the question of why get that person in the first place. If like the whole point of this is a collaboration between a franchise and
is it the whole point of this is
to
produce a song that people might buy and will help to sell the film. I don't care about artistic integrity of it or anything like that.
I think it depends on whether or not the film's composer is involved with it or not. Like, sometimes you do have, like, this is a Madonna song slapped to the front and end, and that's it. There's no kind of working into the theme.
Yes, well, it sounded like it had David Arnold's fingerprints on it to me, and
Not to my knowledge.
And it did come up. The tune of it did get worked into the score a couple of times, I think.
Did it?
Certainly at that party they attend later
Oh,
on.
yeah.
It's like a cool
Yeah, no, that's
lifestyle
true.
way to play Madonna.
Yeah.
Well, I noticed one of the lyrics I wrote down here was Sigmund Freud, analyze this, analyze this, analyze this.
There was a style of lyric writing in the 90s, isn't there? I mean, that sounds like something you'd get in a Robbie Williams song.
I will say, best music video from an artist who's done a Bond song. The music video is really good.
Oh, is it the one with Ali G in it?
No.
Is Austin Powers in it?
No.
Now, of course, is it worth mentioning that before doing this James Bond film, Madonna did the theme tune for Austin Powers 2? Just, you know, so that's where her priorities lie. Beautiful Stranger.
Oh, interesting. Anyway, that's enough about Madonna.
Yeah, so now Bond has been tortured for so long that he's grown a beard and a mullet, and his t-shirt's all torn up. It's terrible. It is fortunately that sort of torture that doesn't have any long-term effects. Not even so much as a broken nose, a couple of missing teeth or anything like that. Although he has some scars on his back, I think.
He's not lost weight.
Too hairy, you can't tell. It's way too hairy.
He's lost weight, has he?
No, he hasn't.
Well, they're feeding
Because
him.
they've been doing that torture where they stuff cream crackers in your mouth and then don't give you any water.
Well, there's a bit in this where, you know, the general comes and takes him off, and he thinks he's going to get killed. The general's talking to him, and Bond goes, "Spare me the unpleasantries." It's a clever line, isn't it?
I mean, you know, I like that bit where he's sort of the firing squad's there and he doesn't know that he's being traded on this bridge and he's walking. And I do think that Brosnan's acting there is really good. Just sort of like...
When they pull him out of the
end?
torture cell in the first place, and he's kind of got a bit of a shake on, and, you know, he looks like he's getting ready to be tortured again. I thought, I thought, you know what? Brosnan doing a bit of acting there. Can't say no to that.
I'd like to, in just general terms, say that I quite enjoyed Brosnan in general throughout this film. I think he is a very good Bond.
Ooh.
I think he might be my favourite Bond. In previous episodes, I feel like... Did I say I wasn't really sure? They all had a bit of something. I feel like at this point I'm starting to warm up to Brosnan being the best.
Wow. That's good. Yeah, no, I don't think he's a problem with this film. Certainly, he does it very well, I think, for the most part, and yeah, good solid Bond.
Where are the diamonds, huh?
So he's traded. We get some horribly expositional dialogue as he's being traded for Zhao, the guy with diamonds in his face, and it's like literally, the line is, "Zhao, I'm being traded." Oh, okay. And then over on his side of the bridge is Michael Madsen, who is a weird choice.
That was bizarre. Yeah,
he's kind of the American M equivalent, and so he comes back later on, more in a bigger role later on.
Well, that was the weird thing. I kind of thought like, oh, they've got Michael Madsen, but apparently they could only get him to do a performance over, like, you know, sending them a tape from the look of things. So. It was odd when he then turned up a bit later on for one scene.
Well, for a while, they were going to spin off Halle Berry's character into her own franchise. They had a script written and everything, and he was to return as the American M. Basically.
Makes more sense why you'd get.
And then they saw Catwoman.
They just saw anything Halle Berry's made.
Yes, I think that probably did factor in. Yes.
Halle Berry. We'll come on to her in a bit, but yeah, she won the Oscar whilst on production of this film.
Yes.
So what a come down that must have been. Fly back to the Bond set.
She didn't make a lot of good choices in the early 2000s.
This film, it feels like it's consciously playing as an attempt at a sort of greatest hits of James Bond moments, but it never quite feels like it's properly committed to that. But, of course, when Jinx is introduced, it is the Ursula Andress introduction sort of remade with Halle Berry walking out of the water in slow motion. Was that a conscious thing? Was that like a...
Oh, completely. Oh, it's all in here. I mean, there's a reference to every single previous Bond film, and we'll see in the Q scene as well later on, there's all these gadgets and things. To your first point about hitting, a bunch of classic
Women?
Bond beats with no real sort of... what was the word you used?
Yeah,
I thought it was
like
really
we
good.
see the guy jump out of a helicopter and then parachute down to the
Union
ground,
Jack.
and he's got a Union Jack parachute, and there's no real justification for any of it. I mean, I guess
As
you
much
can
as in
argue
the
there is,
original, the first time they did it.
Yeah.
Well, I think when you listen to director, this is Lee Tamahori directing this film, who went on to direct Next with Nicolas Cage. You might have seen that film. He directed Triple X
Yeah, but
2.
what did it? Which film was it with Nicolas Cage that he directed next, Calvin?
Yes, very good. When you hear him talking in behind the scenes stuff about Die Another Day, like
Well,
you do.
you can't help but laugh because he's got a funny New Zealand accent, hasn't he?
Well, he certainly seemed to just be sort of like going through the motions, and all the interviews that you see him do, he's sort of like, oh yeah, well we've got to have the women in it, haven't we? We've got to have the cars, we've got to do all this stuff. And I think that a problem with this film is that
It's not funny enough.
that the
Got to have the women in it, in all the cars.
and funnily enough, he was arrested for dressing as a woman and being in a
In
car.
a car?
Mm.
Can you get arrested for that?
What? Sorry, is that illegal?
Well, yeah, do you not know this?
Dressing as a woman
Is that-
or
is
it
that what
'cause-
drag
is it the
racing
shoes
is?
women wear are so impractical? the shoes that the patriarchy forces upon women that are not fit for driving in. Is that the problem?
He was arrested for solicitation in LA, I believe. He was an undercover police officer arrested him, and he was sort of dressed as a lady, soliciting policemen for sex.
Yes. If Hugh Grant can get away with it.
Oh, as in he was doing the soliciting. Was Hugh Grant actually a prostitute?
No.
Oh, okay.
He was soliciting a woman.
Well, Lee Tamahori was wanting to be solicited.
Ah.
But he was driving around himself. Is that how it? Is that the way they do it now?
He's
Is that-
got it all mixed up here.
They
He's
come
got
to you.
confused.
Anyway, but yeah, I don't think that I think that a lot of this film is a result of the second unit going crazy and just taking some cars to Iceland and being like, we're just going to film some stuff. And then it's all sort of being made sense of later.
So they actually shot in Iceland?
Yeah. On a glacier.
Because it kind of looks like they just shot in a multi-story car park. They put some fiberglass and water pumps in it.
Well, some of the internal stuff, but all the car chasing on the ice was on proper ice.
Yeah.
So can we just jump back a sec before we get to Halle Berry? Now, Bond comes back to Britain, but he's they're keeping him in isolation because they're not sure what's going on. And he escapes by willing his heart to stop beating with the power of his mind. Now, I'm no medical expert, but I don't think that's actually possible.
It felt like it was missing the scene where he met like an old wise North Korean man who'd been in torture for decades,
sharing a
who,
cell with
like
this guy.
trained him in the way of
Yeah. So, Calvin, would you like to mount a defense for that or not?
No, I think it's indefensible.
Good. Also, that the woman who comes in, who is presumably a doctor or a nurse of some kind, she just gives him the kiss of life. Like his heart stops.
Yeah, that was
like,
very
don't start
weird.
playing. like that's not going to help.
Well, she obviously just wanted to snog him, Alan. I think he made that clear.
Yeah.
It's not very professional, but
He recovered very quickly, though. Give him that.
She's got a license to kiss.
Jesus.
I didn't really understand what was going on here. So, M's saved him, and she comes into the room and's like, "We've saved you, 007."
Yes.
And then 007's like, "If you've saved me, then let me out of this glass box!" and like bangs on the glass. And then she walks away, so he has to break out
Yeah.
and escape.
Yes. Yeah.
They're keeping him because they've only
What?
because one of their agents was compromised. They were like, "Oh shit,
Right.
Bond's talking. We better get him out of there before he starts leaking all our information all over the place." So they get him out, but now they're like, "We're not sure what's going on. Do we trust him? Let's keep him in a box."
Mm.
Yeah, so he jumps out into the sea and then pops up in Hong Kong. Fortunately, right near a 5-star hotel that he stays at all the time.
Yeah.
So he pops in there. He doesn't even do his pajama top up. He's got no respect at all. Not wearing a tie. But fortunately, the bellboy recognises him.
Yeah. And then he's upstairs just tucking into like a nice party pack sent over by all the independent third-party companies that were financing this film.
Yeah,
So,
what do we have? We have Bollinger, some shirts. There's a Philips electric razor that I don't think would do the job on his beard and hair that they might want us to believe it did.
And then a masseuse is sent up to his room.
And he, of course, immediately assumes that she's a prostitute.
Yeah.
Because that's James Bond.
And he throws something into see what they've very cleverly done is they've set up a 2-way mirror in the cupboard with about a crew of like 3 people filming him on an old-timey hand crank film camera. Because I guess they're trying to get incriminating sex tape footage of him. Is that the reference to From Russia with Love?
Yes. Yep. Well done.
Now, so not only are they assuming he's definitely not going to need a towel while he's here, so don't worry, he's not going to open up the cupboard.
Yeah, he wants
but
just
they
an
also
extra pillow.
seemingly don't. They're also like they're very firmly assured that he's not going to turn the light off in his room at any point. Because of course that's how 2-way mirrors work, isn't it? It's the darker side.
How hard is it to build a set where there's a 2-way mirror in it and there's like a secret room behind it? Why do you have to pick a location where it's just take the door handle off and it'd look like a wall? Like just unscrew the door handle and get away with it.
I don't know why they didn't
They
do that.
didn't even clear out the cupboard behind them. There's pillows and blankets.
That's what I mean. It's full of towels.
Yeah, no, I think it was a last minute rewrite. I don't think that's a very good excuse because, like, literally someone just go and like yank the door handle off the thing and nick a paint over it, and you just think it was some secret compartment. It's the fact that it is just a cupboard is really.
Plus, how do they get out?
Just stick a fake lens on the wall and say it's a spy camera that's been, yeah.
But yeah, what's the plan anyway? Just to have footage of him taking advantage of a masseuse who is not a prostitute and insists she doesn't want to have sex with him, but he's not taking it.
Celebrity sex tapes were all the rage in 2002, Alan. I think that's when the Pamela Anderson one came out around just a bit before. The Paris Hilton one came out around this time. And, it was the early days of the internet. And, of course, James Bond is a very well-known celebrity as established in this universe. So they're just trying to make a bit of money.
Okay, so the end result of this is the Chinese government pay for him to go to Cuba.
Mm-hmm.
And that is where we get Halle Berry.
Yes.
Which, as we've talked about, is a bit of a throwback to the old Ursula Andress there.
Mm-hmm.
I'd totally forgotten that she was in this, and it's about 35 minutes in where she turns up. It's like quite a way in.
Yeah. I mean, that's not unusual. Bond women often turn up later on in the thing because the first one that he sleeps with normally die, whereas the second one is introduced a bit later on. Really doesn't work on the same level as the Ursula Andress. I think it's so overdone with the.
It's terrible.
The slow motion, the fact that she's like, oh, and I'm stroking my very short hair and all this kind of stuff, and the water looks grey and unappealing.
Yeah, it's just not shot as well, and I don't wish to be mean to Halle Berry, but she's no Ursula Andress in that department. And
which department?
You can't swish your long hair about if you have that haircut.
Yeah.
And there's not that James Bond's particularly renowned for his chemistry with his co-stars, but it might be the least amount of chemistry I've seen between a Bond
The
and a Bond
banter
girl.
between them is so terrible.
It's creepy.
And it's because it's just crap scripts, like, what is the names? Purvis and Wade sat in their little office going, oh, and then he says, maybe I can wrap you up like a tortilla. And like, no, that's not going to work. And they're just obviously like two little middle-aged men flirting with each other and trying to make it work. And so there's no chemistry. So if you haven't got actors who can like bring that to life, it's just a crap pun after crap pun.
Jinx, you say?
Born on Friday the 13th.
You believe in bad luck?
Let's just say our relationships don't seem to last.
I know the feeling. Predators usually appear at sunset.
And why is that?
It's when their prey comes out to drink. Too strong for you?
I can learn to like it, if I have the time.
How much time have you got?
Until dawn. What about you?
Oh, I'm just here for the birds. Ornithologist.
Ornithologist, huh? Wow. Now there's a mouthful.
I really do hate the mouthful line where he's like introducing himself as an ornithologist, reference obviously to where Ian Fleming got the name James Bond from the book, but then she says ornithologist, her, and then looks down at his crotch and then says, wow, now there's a mouthful. And it's like, that's not even, that's so many layers to make that work.
You could have at least gone with hornithologist.
Just also, do you love it how Brosnan like really overpronounces mojito in this? He says
Mojito?
Mojito.
Now, one thing that I noticed in this scene, which just put me off, obviously the flirty sort of seductive scene isn't good anyway. But Bond is smoking a cigar, and all I could think was like, you can't. That's not sexy because all I can think of is how much it stinks. Like she's standing there, like trying to be sexy, and there's just cigar smoke wafting around.
She stood there trying to explain to him that you're meant to take the wrapping off first.
Yeah, his fingers are all kind of yellow, stained. Yeah, smoke's rolling.
Yeah, he's probably like double her age as well.
Yeah,
it's just nothing.
Well,
sexy
that
about
really. I know James Bond's often double the age of the women that he's involved with, but it really just didn't play for me here.
Halle Berry's a lot older
creepy.
than you think, though, isn't she?
Yeah.
I
Well, this is it. I know I've definitely seen bigger age gaps in these films, but it felt very creepy here. And I think it's because their interplay was so forced that it just felt like a dirty old man coming onto a woman who's not really into it, except she felt the same way. So to be fair, this film, I think, does quite authentically play like a couple of people who like just want to fuck each other. And then that brings, there's a point where they kind of passionately kiss at the end. And I didn't buy that at all because it's like, well, hang on, we've not established them as lovers.
Yeah, it just comes out of nowhere.
Yeah, they just want to bang.
We do have the most overt sex scene in any Bond film.
I wanted to ask about that. Is this the first time we've really seen Bond going at it?
Yeah.
Full erection.
Because I joked just a few films ago about when we see James Bond having sex with an infrared camera, and he is just lying stationary on top of a woman. There's no thrusting or anything, whereas here it's quite, for a PG-13 or whatever this was.
The point is supposed to be that he's been incarcerated for so long, and this is like his first shag out of that like 13 months, and obviously is shagging women all the time.
Didn't get that at all.
No, I know it's really not. It's like, oh, that's actually like an interesting thing. You could have had him like he finishes in like 10 seconds because
he's a hornithologist.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, I just assumed he'd already had about 3 other masseuses sent up to his room in the hotel and taken care of that immediately.
Again, you have so much. Actually, I've never even thought of that. But yeah, the masseuse, like, because he does just kind of, grab her and start
pretty
sort
much
of
bends her over and.
Yeah, if they'd have actually played with that, like, it's a shame that him being incarcerated isn't an element to be played through the rest of the film, and we see him a bit maybe off his game or something. It's just back to business as usual.
And that business is the Cubans. So yeah, he goes and meets some old Cuban man who's a sleeper agent. They give him some information to get to Zhao.
Is this when James Bond does Weekend at Bernie's?
Yes. That's how he gets into this place, yeah.
I was cracking up. I couldn't believe what I was watching. James Bond punches an old South African man in the face, knocks him out, throws him in a wheelchair, and then he's wheeling him around like, yeah, oh, you want to go over there? Okay. Oh. And then to cause a diversion in the building, in the sort of hospital thing that he's in, he just throws the wheelchair down the corridor.
But, you know, he is set up as an unpleasant man. It's
yeah, he's South African.
I'd love to know what DNA therapy that guy was going to have.
Yeah, so what Bond finds out is going on there is DNA replacement, which now I'm no medical expert, but that's bollocks as far as I'm concerned. You can take someone's DNA out, replace it with someone else's DNA, and not only do you then have new
that's how
DNA,
you get cancer.
It actually changes your face shape as well. It changes your entire skeletal
It changes your race.
and voice and general personality and character as well.
But not enough to be worthwhile. You know, if you introduce something like that into a film, then everyone coming out should be a big mutant, you know? We should get Jaws coming out with an actual shark fin on his back and a whole lot of animal hybrid dinosaur villains or something. Because, you know, it's silly. So embrace it.
And you'd think step one would be take out the diamonds. Because if you're changing your DNA to not be recognisable, the
DNA
surely
will encompass those diamonds and turn them into something else. And they're replacing the DNA of the diamonds. Another thing on the topic of medical science. Now, I do appreciate that an MRI scanner uses magnets somehow and there's magnetic force involved. But I don't think if you just turn one on in a room, something as heavy as a gun or a meat cleaver that appears to be there for some reason is just magically attracted to the outside of the machine. I don't think that's a thing.
They must have to move.
On a limb.
They must have to move everything out of that room whenever they turn on that machine. It's very impractical to have that machine in that room with all those things, actually, I would say.
Yeah, you would have to have like a Magneto-style prison cell for all your MRI scanners.
Well, the doctors would have to go out and stand behind a screen that protects them in case they have any fillings that are going to be ripped out of their head, I suppose. But yeah.
Meanwhile, Halle Berry's here too, because she's also investigating Zhao, and she's got her own little mission. She's
yeah, and that's when we find out that she's a little American spy.
Yeah, should we talk about because Zhao escapes, and there's a bit of action here, a bit of light action, and then we get some of the worst CGI I think I've ever seen in a mainstream Hollywood film, where she does like a backflip off the wall and into the water with a dive.
What I hated with that, right, is these two guards with guns corner her against the wall, and she takes off her dress, so she's just wearing like a swimming costume. And Bond's like, oh my god, what's she gonna do? And the guards are like, she ain't gonna do nothing, mate, we've got her. And it's played like you're not supposed to know, and none of the characters are shocked when she then jumps backwards into the water below.
It's such a long drop, even though it's inconceivable that you would do it.
But it's obviously what she's gearing up to do
think
for
what
about
happens
30
is
seconds.
She takes off her dress or whatever, and the guards are like, oh, tits. Like that's their basic response. And then she looks at Bond, and for some reason the guards never pay any attention to Bond. He's stood there with a gun. He's obviously not one of them, but they're not concerned with him.
An enemy of their enemy is their friend, you know.
Well, he's not presenting himself as an enemy of her.
He was chasing after her with a gun.
Yeah, he was trying to shag her.
Yeah, they don't know that. They think he's Zhao, having completed the DNA assignment.
Yeah, they're like, that's the face you picked.
Anyway, a clue from Zhao. He rips off a canister that's around Zhao's neck containing diamonds that links Zhao to Gustav Graves, who at this point we're not supposed to think is actually a DNA-altered Colonel Moon from the start.
which I didn't. I didn't pick up on that. I didn't guess that was coming.
Ah.
Not at that point, anyway. I'm no diamond expert now, I'll tell you that much. But I think etching your little logo onto a diamond, that basically ruins the fucking diamond, doesn't it? Because it's all about the clarity and the facets and all that. You can't just stick a fucking logo on it.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it massively would take away from the purity. You'd think it would probably.
Yeah.
I would think it would impact on the structural integrity of the diamond to some extent.
At the very least, the first thing you'd have to do would be to shave that off before you did anything with it. So that wouldn't be a waste of time. So after that, we have the first fate. So we introduce Gustav Graves and Miranda Frost, who is his PA or something.
Yep.
And he's a Richard Branson style, media friendly billionaire who's up to some sort of shenanigans that nobody knows what he's up to.
Yeah, it's like the most egregious exposition dump I can remember seeing in anything, to be honest. That bit where he's introduced and all the reporters are just saying like, "Oh, by the way, I hear you're a skilled marksman with a sword. Are we going to see you sword fighting next scene?" Yes, probably, yes. And would you say you're good enough at sword fighting to be a threat for James Bond or any other spies who may take you on? Yes, probably. I'm probably quite formidable, yes.
But that sets them up, and then they go fencing, and Madonna's there. So,
Yeah, not wearing appropriate fencing attire.
she is.
Despite
got a little
leading
leather
this
corset on.
Yeah, but everyone else is wearing the traditional white beekeeper type getup.
Yeah,
She's there in a Tim Burton costume. It's weird.
it's better than what they wore in Hamlet, though.
And then we have Bond and, that trope where Bond and the villain meet and they're initially polite with one another. And then, but it doesn't last very long because they get into a little fencing fight. Can I just ask you, what did you think of Toby Stephens as Gustav Graves? I'm not a fan of this performance at all. I think he's a little bit too hammy and lip curly, and I don't know, it's just really hammy.
There's something about it that I couldn't put my finger on that I didn't like. My instinct was I don't like it, but then whenever I started to think about it and examine it, I would think, well, he's much better than every other James Bond villain I can think of.
He isn't. He's not better than Goldfinger or
Yeah, he is.
Sean Bean.
He's not as good as Christopher Walken, but I mean, I don't know. He's got a lot more personality and energy about what he's doing. But the whole time, I think you're just wishing they'd cast someone, like Richard E. Grant, someone good to do the same thing.
Yeah, it's perhaps a bit bland.
But I think by the standards of James Bond films, I think he's actually not bad. I don't know.
Here's what I've learned about him by looking at his IMDb. He appears to be the voice of James Bond now.
Yes, in some of the audiobooks. Yes.
Yeah.
Really?
So this fight sequence, it's not
so
bad.
they start off by fencing, like doing proper fencing, and then he's like, "Oh, let's up the stakes and
well, yeah, Bond hustles him. Bond lets him get 2 hits in and then massively ups the stakes.
Let's use real swords if you want to do it right. And then he takes some swords off the wall that aren't fencing swords, they're just swords, and then they don't fence, they just slash at each other.
But before that, Bond sort of says, instead of money, how about we play for this diamond? By the way, I know you're a villain and I know I'm a spy, I'm James Bond, and this is the diamond. And he just tells him everything. It's not good spy work, you wouldn't have thought. It's at very least quite a gamble.
But he does that all the time. He always he's pretending to be polite and then really passive aggressively goes, "Oh, by the way, what about all those diamonds you've got in your mate's face?"
Thing is, it's normally like if we're comparing this to Bond and Goldfinger, on the golf course scene in Goldfinger, this is way more aggressive than passive aggressive. This is them outright trying to kill each other in the first meeting, which is unusual.
Yeah. Well, I liked that. I liked how it went from 0 to 11 pretty immediately. I didn't like the arbitrary rules of whoever draws first blood from the torso wins.
We didn't draw first blood.
Which only seemed to exist because James Bond immediately gets a nosebleed and would have lost otherwise.
That might be some old dueling rule or something. I don't know. You don't go for the face. I'll make my money.
Yeah.
But then they finished the fight. I noticed Madonna didn't get involved.
No.
You know, she's the teacher there. She's the authority figure. She should be splitting them up.
Well, she said they say something like, "Don't you want to get involved?" And she says, "I don't like cockfights," which I think that's one of the sharpest, immediate James Bond.
That's when they're actually just
kind of
fencing.
moments.
But
Yeah.
I think she'd be liable for insurance reasons because if it's her class,
Yeah, but they leave the class. They take it all round.
I don't know. I think she could have a civil suit.
Maybe, but I think I get the impression Graves would just pay up and cover anything like that
Do
himself.
they
out of pocket.
traditionally have fencing clubs at these prestigious old gentlemen's clubs? Because there's a lot of old men around who are like, oh my goodness, as they go fencing through.
A woman.
There's someone reading a newspaper and then the sword cuts the newspaper in half.
But the sword goes through the newspaper and right up to his nose, and he goes, "Oh," and his mustache bristles.
One of my favourite parts of the film, in fact, is in the sound mix in the background when they're doing the fight. You can hear someone go, "Steady!"
Now, as they're leaving and cleaning up the mess,
Yeah, I think you're going to ask the same question I have written down here. A very interesting looking bellboy comes up to James Bond and says, "Oh, mate, don't worry about it. Place needed redecorating anyway. Hey." And I can only assume that's
competition
like
winner.
a CBBC presenter who was on set making news round and got given a cameo or something.
And now he looks really out of place because he's black for a start, which in these old-fashioned clubs
But
looks out of place.
it's not
But
just
more than
that. He's got huge dreadlocks tied up.
He doesn't look like a neat and tidy concierge
Exactly.
of a posh place. But also the delivery of the line is weird. He doesn't seem like an actor. Calvin, do you know this story?
I believe his name is Oliver Skeet, and he
That
is
correct, yeah.
He is a show jumper.
Right.
Yeah, basically, in the 90s, he attained minor celebrity as a show jumper. Even though he wasn't that good as a show jumper, particularly, because he looked so out of place as a show jumper, because he was black for a start, but also all these big dreadlocks. So it's kind of appropriate that they put him in this part, that he was totally out of place. I kind of like that, actually. But I still don't know why they put him in the part, because he's not an actor.
It's
he
really
was just a bit of a
odd.
celebrity. And it's also really at the tail end of his celebrity as well. He's like a truck driver now or something.
Around this time, it feels a bit Goldie at least had a role in the last one, but it does seem like a very strange sort of, you had to be there at the time.
If it had been a scene with show jumpers, it would have kind of made sense, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Or if this guy had just been a henchman, I wouldn't have really thought twice about it. It's the weird one line out of nowhere. He's not even in the scene earlier on, setting up his appearance in that scene. I've just looked him up, and his other notable credits are being one of the celebrities that was duped in an episode of Brass Eye and 2 episodes of Dick and Dom in The Bungalow.
Yeah. Oh, you were right on the children's TV front.
Well, he seems like a very friendly, full of energy kind of character. I know why you thought children's TV. He just seemed too energetic for the part.
If anything, he's not in this film enough.
But yeah, make use of it if you're going to bring someone in for a weird cameo. Do something. But anyway, so he gets a key and then he goes and meets M.
Yeah.
in a
I'm on to
secret
page 2 of my
station.
notes now, by the way. That's
Okay.
page 1.
Excellent.
Well, we are halfway through the film, and this is where we have the full MI6 briefing thing, really. And she's
Yes.
like, you know what? We actually want you back. It's all right. Now go and have your weird 3D hologram virtual video game training.
Oh my
sequence.
god, Money Punny's dead!
You know what? I do actually really like this sequence, this whole training thing. I know it's really stupid, but I still, and this was a direct result of the GoldenEye game in particular that had come out and was very well known and popular at the time. And Bond was becoming a video game character, and this was their sort of homage to Bond as a video game character, where it's it's just like straight down the line, just, shooting action around MI6. I like that he shoots M in the shoulder pretty much.
Flesh wound. Yeah, it's silly. It's completely realistic, virtual reality, whatever.
Anyway, we have John Cleese as Q now, firmly establishing him in the role.
Is this the first time he's gone solo as Q?
Yes, and only.
Yeah, they only introduced him the last film.
I really liked him here. I think he steps into the role perfectly.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure about him in the torch handing over previous film, but I really like him now. It's just him doing his job.
Yeah, they didn't go for any physical comedy. For some reason.
Now, none of the gadgets are particularly interesting or new or exciting, apart from maybe the car, I suppose. But in spite of that, it's one of my favourite Q scenes. It's just delivered very well, very swift. The fact that it's in the London Underground, I really enjoyed.
So this is your favourite Q scene because Q's not in it. Like, I think that's basically what you're saying. Because an old man reading off cue cards.
Well, it's not my favourite Q scene. My favourite Q scene's probably in Star Trek The Next Generation with John Delancey.
I think you do have something with, like, as much as I love Desmond Llewellyn and I prefer him as Q to John Cleese, Desmond Llewellyn was, he wasn't a comedy actor. He was a bit player that kind of got lucky and kept being asked back, whereas John Cleese is actually a comedy actor and he can actually do some of the comedy stuff and the lines and all that kind of stuff. I think he's really good, and if they'd have continued with this kind of direction of the films, he'd probably still be doing it now.
They should have got Rowan Atkinson. That would have been perfect.
Right, so everyone loves to shit on the car. I don't mind it. I think it's... I think it makes logical sense for like where the gadgets were going. We've had cars that can go underwater and all this, and remote control and all this kind of stuff. So doesn't bother me as much as it bothers a lot of other people.
I was all geared up to hate the car, and then it came out, and I thought... nothing. What's wrong with that? What's the problem with this car? I'll tell you what I don't like about the car is that the use within the film is laughably incompetent from a writing point of view.
At one point, he's driving 3 feet behind some people, and they don't know he's there because he's invisible.
Yeah, that's it. It might as well just be a Prius, and they don't hear it because it's so quiet, and that's a superpower. But no, so he has this invisible car, which allows him to drive secretly up to this place, but normally Bond just airdrops or whatever in, and it's not even like he's in need of secrecy really at that point. Anyway, what I don't like is basically the second he starts using it, the bad guy just shoots it and it breaks the invisibility power.
Yeah.
And then the invisibility power fixes itself and he uses it again, but it doesn't do anything.
Yeah, what happens is Bond pulls spikes out the wheel so he can kind of basically drive up a wall and get out of the way. But presumably if Zhao could see him doing that, he would have turned the steering wheel to get him. But instead he's thinking, well, he's invisible, but what the hell, I'll just drive straight forward into this abyss.
But he does ram the car, doesn't he? Doesn't he knock the car up against the wall?
No, he misses it.
I'll be honest, I couldn't really tell what the fuck was happening because the car was invisible.
To say you've gone to the trouble of having an invisible car, which is a sort of stupid thing, they just don't, they don't use it. Like, find a big, your big finale moment to use it properly, and they don't.
But then it's not, an invisible car isn't a massively visual thing for an action scene, is it? That's the problem.
It's distinctly not visual.
It's the opposite, exactly.
Plus, you can still hear the engine running, so it doesn't really work. As
and
this,
you can see the
covert
snow flying out the back of the tires.
Yeah.
And the villain has a thermal camera, so
it's
just pointless and stupid and not scientific.
James Bond should have had an invisibility cloak. That would have been interesting. Could have done something with that.
They gave him one in the video. They had a video game that came out a few years after this film, and it's basically like Brosnan's unofficial 5th film, and that you do have an invisibility suit in that game.
Well, the invisibility cloak in Super Smash Brothers is from the GoldenEye game, is it not?
Oh, you could be invisible. It was a cheat. Yeah.
Interesting.
Anyway, we're talking about this whole chunk of action that happens at the Ice Palace in Iceland now, if we're good to talk about this bit.
And Halle Berry's there, and I'd totally forgotten she was in the film, because she hasn't been there for about 40 minutes.
They do a whole Goldfinger homage.
Ice Palace, Halle Berry. They have shit banter. And then he shags Miranda Frost. Is that what happens?
Yeah, for not good. Like, he's doing some investigating, and she comes back to his room, and they sleep together for no real reason. But they do it very like sort of down to business kind of thing. Like, they're just right. Let's get on with this, which is quite odd considering you don't need to sleep with each other now that you've provided an alibi.
Throughout the whole thing, she's just like, "Oh, I don't like you. You're a twat. You're a bit of a chauvinist. 20 years older than me." And then she's like, well, look, we're naked now. We're going to shag or what? Now, of course, it seems like it's a weird situation and terrible chemistry. But as it turns out, she's the bad guy. And that's why she was doing it. So actually, in retrospect, it makes sense that it was so weird and awkward. What doesn't make sense is why Bond doesn't pick up on that at all. And he thinks it's all right.
Because that's normally what the
That's just
women are
normal
like
for him,
these.
yeah.
So, yeah. She's 21, I think, in this film.
Yeah, this was her first
Really?
film.
Oh,
Yeah, and I
just
would-
made me feel even worse about the situation.
I would never have guessed. She's got a very odd look about her where, like, I don't think she's aged particularly
Yeah, she definitely looks older than that. She doesn't
in the
look
20 years since this film. I think she's just had her teeth done. That's pretty much it.
She's got a good look. Like, I do like her in this film, and she acts older than 21, I would say. And I think she always brings that maturity to whatever she's
It definitely
in.
feels like the character is older than that, even if she isn't.
Yeah.
You don't get the impression that she's supposed to be that young.
Yeah. But this is all around where we get the villain's big old scheme. He's got a satellite, a diamond satellite that he can use to harness the sun's energy and make a big space laser.
Laser.
Yeah, this got very silly, didn't it? Very
Power
quickly.
of the sun.
Well, it's obviously...
They've already done diamonds in space, right? Was this
Yes.
another reference?
Blofeld had a diamond satellite in Diamonds Are Forever, which also had a laser.
When do we see the guy on the dream machine?
Yeah, that's around here.
What's the point in that?
Life's precious. Why waste it on sleep?
That doesn't go anywhere.
It doesn't go anywhere. Yeah, but why doesn't he sleep? What's that about?
Crazy villain thing.
And why is he not dead if he doesn't sleep?
It's a nice little detail, but you can't just drop that in and leave it. You have to do something with it. James Bond goes and does a heist in his dream, maybe, or takes advantage of him being on the dream machine at a set time or something. It
He's just really pissed off all the time because he's insomniac and just gets crabby.
Well, this is around about the point where we find out that he is actually Colonel Moon from the pre-credit sequence, who's had the DNA thing, because Zhao comes in and everything. I think it would have been a nice moment to kind of have the performance maybe shift, or like, so you understand. There is a line in here that he based the persona of Gustav Graves on James Bond, which I think that's a good concept, but I would have preferred to see him slip out of that, maybe. I think a duality of performance would have been really cool here, and they just don't do it.
Yeah.
You know what else is really annoying with that dream machine, right? He spends 2 hours on it a day, something like that.
Just sleeping, isn't it?
I was going to say, is that not just sleep? Is he not just spending 2 hours a day sleeping? And granted, that's not a lot of time, but
Margaret Thatcher.
yeah, it's just say I've made a machine that doubles the strength of sleep. You're rested twice as much when you sleep. Because otherwise, he's just sat there in a machine. I don't know. It's just fucking weird. Anyway, sorry.
There's a lot of stuff happening here, and I want to touch on some of it. This is like a whole half an hour sort of chunk. Probably one of my worst moments in the entire series is windsurfing the tsunami. How did that play to you two? I'm nervous you're just going to say, oh, well, it's just like what he does anyway. Typical James Bond. But it's a real start.
I remembered that as one of the worst moments in cinema history. Now, when I came to it in this film, it actually was not as bad as I remembered it, but it is a terrible bit of filmmaking, just purely on a kind of CGI, logic, physics. But like in terms of something that Bond would do, it does kind of make sense, I guess.
It felt more like James Bond branching out with some new tricks than I've ever seen before, and I didn't mind it, to be honest. It reminded me of Ace Rimmer from Red Dwarf.
Yes,
it's definitely
which
not
is a
something you
parody
can take
of this sort of nonsense. So
yeah, it's not something you can take remotely seriously. But then this is a bullshit film with a dream machine and a guy with diamonds in his face.
The dream machine is one of the most sensible bits of the film.
If anything, I need the film to be entirely this sort of thing. But I agree, it's not realised particularly well. But then I did find it far more interesting than most of the straight action scenes in the film. I found it more engaging. So
I think if you put this scene in Johnny English, I'd probably just go, yeah, okay, whatever. But in a Bond film, you're supposed to be taking it seriously.
But I find it more interesting than just watching a car drive around,
Yeah,
So, I'm not going to outright dismiss it. Yeah.
Now, so Halle Berry gets basically shoved in a box for ages in this bit of the film, and she is rescued by Bond. So she's just kind of a useless character. A really crap character, actually, altogether. Like, I don't think the performance is particularly hot, but also it's just not much there. She's not given much agency to actually do anything.
I'm really quite surprised to hear there was talk of a spin-off, because Miranda Frost is the one if you're going to make a spin-off about someone in this film, surely she's a more interesting character than Halle Berry.
I wanted to ask a question, though, of you, Calvin. So in this film, Miranda Frost turns out she's working for the baddie, and so when she shagged Bond, it was all just part of the plan. And it got me thinking, what proportion of Bond's shagging is done where the woman is doing it purely out of a magdalene obligation?
That's a good question. It does come up
because Grace Jones definitely did it.
Yeah, Magda and Octopussy did it.
A lot of them are prostitutes, so I'm not counting that as proper seduction.
No, it does come up every once in a while. More often than not, if they're villains. If it's a villainous lady, then it's
Why didn't she shag him, and then when he falls asleep straight afterwards, just like stab him in the throat?
Yeah.
Just bite his cock off.
And then... it's just as simple as that. But yeah, then... So wait until he's asleep, and then, rather than just shoot him through the head, just drop a little tarantula on him. And then just walk away, happy that the job is done.
Would be more efficient. Yeah.
Have we gone past the scene where it just goes full Star Wars for no reason? Zhao walks in a cloak and takes his hood back.
Oh yeah,
and then starts shooting electricity out of his fingers at someone.
Oh no, that's on the plane at the end. That's Graves himself.
Yeah. Oh, is that?
But
Graves?
Zhao does have his. Well, it's Matrix really is what they're going for, and they have kind of that. That slow motion thing in one shot.
Zhao is zapping Halle Berry with the electric gauntlet when she's tied up to the thing. And
yeah.
That's
what I'm thinking. Yeah. And then there's a laser disco fight where they have to save Halle Berry, which is just so profoundly stupid on so many levels. These lasers seem to slice through people pretty quickly, but there's a bit where it just kind of singes someone's jumper a little bit, and they kind of go, ooh.
Okay, then there's this is the point where I was kind of starting to lose a sense of existence, and I stopped making notes. I know something happens on a plane.
I'm similar to you, Alan, because this, of course, leads into our big... Well, it feels like the big climax of the film. The laser beam starts getting shot everywhere on Earth, blowing stuff up. They use it to start melting the ice palace. We have a big car chase out in the ice. Bond kills Zhao in a little confrontation. And it really plays like, oh, there you go, you've saved the day, the end. And I made the note, say what you will about this nonsense film, but it has zipped along for a James Bond movie. I've not noticed the running time once. I'm really quite pleased with this. And I was feeling very positive about the film at this point. But then it just kept going. And there is another half hour of the film at this point. And it's not like, oh, we've got to get it up to 90 minutes. At this point, the film is 1 hour 45 in, so on the longer side, really, for a film with this amount of substance. And it keeps going for another half hour, and we get all this bullshit with someone flying off into space, but not quite, and oh my god.
Well, they send a missile into space. No one flies up there.
Yeah, well, they're flying up into the sky on the aeroplane. I started to get so angry. This is when I turned on the film. Normally this happens halfway through in a James Bond film, so maybe that's worth something. But it was more annoying here because they were done. They were so comfortably done with a nice zippy Bond movie, and then why are they so long, Calvin? Why can't they make a film that's shorter than 2 hours?
They have. This is just one of the longer ones. Like, this is 2 hours 12 minutes, and they are normally around the 2 hour
2 hours
mark.
13.
Oh, okay.
That extra minute was I felt it.
But the climax is it's all on this plane, which is immediately less interesting than the Ice Palace, I think. And you've got Gustav Graves in his weird Sith lightning suit, just shooting laser beams and
more terrible slow motion as well in this climax. Just loads of it.
Yeah, really bad.
There is the amazing bit of writing. Well, is this amazing writing, or is this some of the worst writing I've ever heard? I can't help. Please help me decide.
Okay.
The bad guy says, time to face destiny to James Bond, and then James Bond goes, time to face gravity.
That's great. I think
and opens his parachute. I think I really like that line, but I can't tell if it's like that X-Men line that about the frog getting hit by lightning, where it's like it's such a balancing act of performance and stuff. You know, it could have been done well there, but
you know why it really doesn't
work, and I think this could have been done terribly.
Do you know why that line really doesn't work?
Because it's air resistance and not gravity.
Yeah, he doesn't plummet to the ground. He gets pulled by air resistance into a jet engine.
Yeah. Fair. And then Halle Berry and Rosamund Pike have their separate fight as well. They do a sword fighting thing.
You know what he should have done? He should have said, time to face destiny, and then James Bond should have gone, time to destiny face, and then smacked him in between the eyes with his fist.
We should point out the fact that Colonel Moon's father is here, and we do have this sort of strange emotional scene between the two of them. This is a character who I think the actor does a pretty good job, the general, but it's... I don't know what it's doing in this film. You certainly don't need it.
It's very odd.
Perhaps that's part of the issue that we, from the villain's point of view, we never get any sort of into the personal story of what he's doing or why he's doing it. And then even what he's trying to achieve, you know, the stakes are like he's destroying the demilitarized zone between North and South Korea. And, you know, obviously this giant sun laser you could wipe anybody out with it, I guess, is the threat. But it's just like there's no stakes or there's no kind of obvious end goal that you know, you've got to get to this point and stop the thing with 7 seconds left on the clock. You know, it's just sort of like nothing really happening.
Bearing in mind there's a giant laser beam in this film, bearing in mind Pierce Brosnan says Saved by the Bell, bearing in mind that there is a man with diamonds in his face, all this just nonsense, laser disco, everything like that, Ice Palace. I would just like to point out that this film is what we would refer to as post 9/11. That's just baffling, isn't it? I mean, this must have been one of the last pre 9/11 films that kind of slipped through the cracks before we decided we don't want this sort of bullshit.
Well, I think Bond is a big enough
serious, right?
Yeah, Bond is a big enough entity that it just trundles along in the same vein. It takes a bit longer to turn around. It's kind of like Charlie Chaplin making The Great Dictator like 10 years after sound films came out.
Well, on a similar note, this film came out the same year as Austin Powers in Goldmember.
The best one.
And
am I being sarcastic? I don't know.
I can't tell.
We will never know.
But I mean, not a world of difference between the films, really, is there? I guess that's what I'm saying. You'd expect one to be... I think, genuinely, you could show people footage from both films and make a good quiz out of it, where they can't guess which one belongs to which film.
Yeah.
Anyway, they beat the bad guy on the plane. The plane's going to crash. Halle Berry says, I guess we're going down together. James Bond says, hopefully not yet, or whatever it is. What is it? Not yet?
Says, get in this helicopter. Huh?
But then, sorry, is that Mel B? No, she says, looks like we're going down together. He says, not yet. Now, I don't mind that. Nice bit of Bond innuendo nonsense. But then when they get to the ground, he then says, so what were you saying about going down on each other? You want to suck each other
But that's it. That's because the problem is, it's no longer an innuendo. He's basically going, do you want to suck my cock while I eat your
Yeah, but that's what I mean. It's like,
there's no innuendo.
doesn't that just immediately remove any semblance of suave that Bond has, that he then has to like chase her up again like a fucking dog hoping for a treat? It just,
I've never realised that that's innuendo. It's I've never.
Oh my God.
No, I never occurred to me. I just thought I just took it all at face value.
And then they just spend the end bit filling her with diamonds so that when they hand them over, she secrete them out of
what I was just saying about how you could play clips from this film and people would legitimately believe it was an Austin Powers movie. I think this is the most clear-cut example of that. The scene outside the little hut they just stumble upon with no one in it to go and shag in, and you just hear them from outside going,
Wait, don't pull it out. I'm not finished with it yet.
See? It's a perfect fit.
Uh-huh. Leave it in.
Well, it's gotta come out sooner or later.
No, leave it in, please. A few more minutes.
oh, put it back in. Oh, it's so
I
hard.
hate it. Yeah. It would
It's
also
because
be
it's not
really
good.
uncomfortable.
It's because it's not well. Like if it was Austin Powers, it would have been done well comedically.
Yeah.
Whereas this is like someone putting a diamond in her belly button. That's not. First of all, it's not a thing you do, and you wouldn't rephrase it as putting it in. It's hard or anything like that. You
Yeah,
would
it's just like
be
leave it in a little longer and all that. It's
She should have said, "Is that a diamond in your pants, James, or are you just pleased to see me?" And then they look and the diamonds are on the side table. That's how this film should have ended. I've not mentioned that they escape the crashing aeroplane by throwing a helicopter out the back and turning it on mid-flight. So, it's very fortunate that they stay upright.
Well, that was what he was
the whole-
fanning about with the whole time, trying to get it upright before he pulled the choke out or whatever you do to start a helicopter.
So we have a wrap-up scene with Moneypenny as well, as she is using the hologram machine.
Finally, the end of the era, James Bond comes in, starts snogging her. He's like, right, let's just do it.
Throws her over the desk. I quite like this. Obviously knew where it was going, but
This is a controversial moment in Bond lore, isn't it? It's quite, the fans aren't sure about this. Is that right, Calvin?
I don't know. I mean, I think everyone acknowledges that it's very silly.
I've heard the idea that fans feel like it goes too far, and you should. They're the Ross and Rachel, and when they get together, that's which I suppose this is the finale, isn't it?
I'll tell you what. On that level, it could have stopped with a kiss, and then John Cleese walks in, and she's just like, "Oh, sorry, I was just busy." But it ends with her like on the floor mid orgasm, and he walks in like, "What's going on?" And she has to like.
I think John
pull
Cleese
tight
gives.
down.
It's something that could so easily be overplayed, and he just plays it perfectly here. That little bit, I don't mind the scene myself.
Do you know what would have been better though if Desmond Llewellyn had done it, because they wouldn't have told him what was happening, and he would have just been
and he'd just be holding a foot-long Subway sandwich.
Moneypenny, did you want my 12-incher? And then they'd laugh. It'd be hilarious.
Do you think if Desmond Llewellyn had stayed on board the franchise for another 10 years, he'd become the official spokesman of Subway? In the same way James Bond's always selling Rolexes and Heineken.
I think you're absolutely right. So a criticism of this is that I mean, it's not consistent throughout the entire films, but obviously Bond and Moneypenny have never consummated their relationship on screen, and you do get the sense that it is a bit of flirty banter between two people, and not necessarily that she would necessarily go off and have sex with him.
Fantasy of it, though, you know.
Yeah, whereas this, it very much says like, oh no, yeah, I want him.
It would have been better if you sort of see that opening bit where he like flips her over the desk, and then it just sort of fades out. And then you see her like staggering out of the hollow suite, and she's like, "Ugh, that was disappointing."
You see that opening bit, but then we see it from John Cleese's point of view. He just walks in, and then we just see her with the goggles on, going like thin air. And John Cleese can sort of go, you know how to play it.
Oh dear.
What it would have been better if Bond comes in, he's like, Moneypenny, you know, right, I'm ready, I want to shag you, and she's like, no thanks. And like that was her fantasy, is like turning him down and like winning.
That would have been brilliant.
Winning the flirtation that they've had for 40 years.
Isn't that basically all she does in the other movies anyway?
Nah, she's gagging for it.
This was never conceived or produced as the end of the Brosnan era, was it? Is that some decision that came after the fact?
Yep, they only ever take them one at a time, which will become a problem when they try to serialise them a bit more in the Craig era, as we'll discover. But yeah, no, the plan was Brosnan had an option, I think, for a fifth film in the contract, so they could have just called him back. A couple of years after this, they did the Everything or Nothing video game, or maybe the next year, and Brosnan was still Bond. Like, he was still Bond for a good couple of years after this film was released. And then eventually, they say it's because they were writing the Jinx script, and they were writing it as like an origin story, and they just so happened to get the rights to Casino Royale back around about this time, in the sort of like late 90s, and then that kind of inspired them to do the origin story of James Bond. But it's, I mean, obviously we'll talk about it more next time, but they're very much influenced by Batman Begins and all that kind of stuff, and I think, Sol, you touched on it earlier about this being the last sort of pure, silly, escapist, fun, sort of big action franchise film, after 9/11, where things all sort of went a bit more serious. And they're obviously going to react to that with Casino Royale. Everything becomes more grounded.
And it's a good time to, embrace the change, bring in a new actor and try something new. I think it's a good choice.
Mm.
Can I throw a quick quiz at you, Sol, for you, I think?
Yeah.
Maybe Calvin can help you if you can't do it. I think you'll be able to do this. Name 5 Pierce Brosnan films post Die Another Day.
Oh, post Die Another Day?
Yes.
He did something about being on an island, and if it wasn't called The Island, I don't know what it was called.
Okay, I don't know what that is.
But he was a mad kind of Dr. Moreau-esque figure in it.
There's a film called Once Upon an Island. Is that what you're thinking of?
No, that's not it, I don't think.
Oh, I know which one you mean. Yes, I've not seen it.
Eurovision, of course.
Yeah, okay, that's one.
Right.
I thought you'd do better than this. There's a couple of obvious ones.
Yep,
Pierce
in that
Brosnan.
Eurovision theme.
When was the art heist one, the Thomas Crown affair? Was that pre?
Yeah,
that was pre.
Damn it.
Bond, I think.
Yeah, I think that was 99, 98.
Can I have that Simpsons episode where he's the house?
That was
he was
before
Bond.
Die Another Day.
Damn it.
Look, there's two really obvious ones. Eurovision sort of leaning into
two that we've covered on this podcast.
Really?
Maybe some singing involved.
Oh, Mamma Mia.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mamma Mia, here we go again.
Yes.
There's another one that you should definitely get. Another one we've covered on this podcast, in fact.
Yes. Sequel to a film that you really like? To 2 films that you really like?
Not exactly a sequel.
Well, no.
How obvious
Oh,
do we
The World's
make it?
End. Yeah, of course. He's quite forgettable, isn't he? Really?
Oh, you were complimenting him at the start of this. Your favourite
Well, no,
Bond.
that's why it's surprising that I just can't. I can draw more Timothy Dalton films post Die Another Day to mind.
Go on, Calvin. Throw a few at us.
Yeah,
You
I
do
don't
on
know.
this.
What have we got? After the Sunset, November Man, IT,
Never heard of
I've
them.
never heard of these. No.
The
I
Foreigner.
have heard of IT.
The Matador was the one that I remembered as being is like, oh, look at him, he can act, kind of, after Bond film. Maybe
Yeah.
The Matador.
Yeah. He's had a fairly solid career.
The Ghost.
Oh, The Ghost, of course.
Oh, the Ghost, of
That
course.
worked with
I have
Roman
seen that one,
Polanski,
there
you know,
go.
you got to work with him.
But I'm looking him up on IMDb now, and I think that is literally the 5 films after Die Another Day that I know. Oh no, he did that Remember Me 9/11 piece of shit that I haven't
yeah,
actually
he
seen,
did.
to be fair to it. Oh, he's in Percy Jackson. I haven't seen that, but he's some kind of Greek god or something, isn't he? I'm just going to look up what that Island movie is.
Well, look, I mean, of all the post-Bond actors, I mean, well, I guess, you know, Connery had a fairly successful career afterwards, including winning an Oscar.
Oh, that old thing.
Yeah. But Roger Moore didn't do much after he'd sort of given up the Bond mantle. I don't know if I've ever seen Timothy Dalton lead another film.
No,
True.
he didn't do anything before though either. So
Anyway, there we go. That's the end of the era.
the Brosnan era, yes.
The first timeline, really. The first, of the whole thing. So,
Shall we rate it?
yes.
Haven't done that yet.
God, I hate coming to the ratings for Bond films because they're just unquantifiable for me in that regard. I don't really put them into these. It's odd. It's never been one of my favourites, and I do often come back to it sort of thinking like, oh, it's stupid and all this, but I'll still have a good enough time with it. But I do end up getting quite bored with it. I think it is a bit too long, and I don't think Toby Stevens is very good as the villain. I don't think Halle Berry is very good. Miranda Frost, Rosamund Pike, I like her. I like some of the action sequences. But it's lesser Bond for sure, so I'm going to give it a 5 out of 10.
Wow.
Is that a lot or low? Or
That's for you. That's like a 1 out of 10 for anyone else. And the Bond scale. The Bond scale only goes from 5 to 10. Well, it goes from 5 to 8, I suppose. But, you know. I found this one interesting because on a structural level, I was fine with it. Like, the one thing led to another, and it kind of all worked. The Bond character works throughout. Yeah, there's a whole kind of last scene at the end, which just feels unnecessary, but it's too long, blah, blah, blah. But the real failings here were character and script, just the way they interacted with each other, and yeah, just a lack of character all around and poor writing. The villain, we don't get enough kind of impetus from him, who he is, why he's doing what he's doing, all that. It's just lacking a lot. And obviously all the failings with just physical reality being thrown out the window. I gave it a 4 out of 10, which, considering I've touted this as one of the worst films ever made, is a pretty big step up, I think you'll agree.
You prefer this to Dawn of the Dead?
It's fair. Go on, Sol.
That film on an island is Urge, by the way. I've just looked up. The difficulty was I
We've got an urge on an island. Huh?
yeah. Apparently I never rated it on IMDb, but it was terrible. Yeah, I had this down as a 3 out of 10, which represented a kind of 2.5 out of 10 based on when I first saw it, and I hated it. It's not that bad. As I say, James Bond is just crap. So I've actually bumped that up to a 4 out of 10 myself. It's far from my least favourite Bond film that we've covered, but it is towards the bottom.
What is your least favourite Bond film? Just out of curiosity.
The first Timothy Dalton one, I think.
Oh!
I think that's the one that really angered me for the same way Alan inexplicably got pissed off with Dawn of the Dead. Something about that first
because you liked it. There was something there that was working, and then they threw
No.
it away.
That was the second Dalton one that I kind of liked half of. Yeah, exactly. That's the weird thing.
My lowest is a 3 out of 10, which I gave to On Her Majesty's Secret Service, The Man with the Golden Gun, and The World Is Not Enough.
Oh.
So it's not even my worst Brosnan one.
Interesting.
Interesting. I would never have guessed.
I have this down as my 17th favourite James Bond film so far. So what's that? Third from the bottom? It's in between On Her Majesty's Secret Service, which is above it, and For Your Eyes Only, which is below it. And that means I also prefer it to Thunderball and The Living Daylights. So there you go.
Well, who'd have thunk it?
I'm just doing a bit of quick maths here. I'm going to work out my average.
Ooh, I'm going to do that.
And what have your favourites been? What's the highest
Oh, wow.
rating?
My average is exactly 5 out of 10.
My favourite one so far is still Doctor No. So,
God.
talk about living up to the name of our show.
Goldfinger's my favourite, which I know is not exactly a controversial statement.
That's my second favourite, yeah.
I've got hopes for a couple of those Daniel Craig ones, though.
Yeah, Daniel Craig's a weird one, because it could so easily go either way for me. I could love it and think, yeah, I get this Bond, I'm enjoying this Bond. Or I could just think, oh, this is a load of shit like Bond always is. Or I could just think like, whatever, 7 out of 10, which would probably still make it my favourite James Bond film.
I think it may well end up, like, I know obviously Alan's seen them before. I'm very curious to know what you're going to make of them, Saul, because it is a big, stark difference, I think, anyway. Like, they bring back Judi Dench, and that's kind of about it, really.
Is Colin Salmon in it?
Nope.
Oh my god. How will we cope? He had to make some Paul W.S. Anderson films.
He did. He went on to be in Alien vs. Predator not long after this.
So, that's the end of the Brosnan era. We are looking forward to Casino Royale. That's the first one.
Yes, very much. I'm really looking forward to that. When do you think we'll be getting to that? Will that be tying into the release of No Time to Die? The next date, anyway.
Next November.
Before its postponement again.
I don't know. I think we should stop planning what's the dates.
I don't think we should plan these at all. I think we should all just arrange a time and come and then decide what film we're going to talk about at the very start.
Did you give your average number there, Alan? I didn't.
My average was exactly 5 out of 10.
Oh. Well, I'm more positive than you then. I've just worked mine out. Mine's 5.3 out of 10.
Oh.
Ooh.
So I like James Bond more than you, if you can believe it.
I can believe that.
That's mental.
Well, I was thinking with this one, because Calvin's gone with a low score there as well, is this our lowest rated one as a team?
Do you want me to find out our current lowest rated one?
I mean, if you've got it to hand, I'm not going to...
It's on the website.
Well, the average there of ours would be, 4 1/3? 2 4s and a 5?
The lowest rated so far is Thunderball, which has got a 40% score.
Well, this would be
which
43%,
is based on,
I guess, 44 by your logic.
based on me giving it... It's based on all of us giving it 4 out of 10.
Oh, really? Oh, so Calvin sunk it.
So what? That means we prefer Die Another Day to Thunderball, right?
It does, yes.
Yeah, well, quite rightly, because Thunderball is dog shit. So there we go.
Right, well, that's it. Thank you for listening, everyone. Thank you for joining us again, Calvin.
No, it's my pleasure.
Just on the off chance that there's anyone listening to this that isn't already aware of your James Bond work, do you want to plug your YouTube channel?
Oh, go on then. Yes, you can find my in-depth reviews of many aspects of the James Bond franchise if you just search for Calvin Dyson on YouTube. That's Calvin spelt like Calvin Klein and Dyson spelt like the vacuum cleaner.
Yes, and you are the #1 Bond reviewer on YouTube?
I wouldn't put the number on it, but I am
you are a Bond reviewer on YouTube.
I am a Bond reviewer on YouTube, yes.
You are a significant member of the Bond community, though. In fact, your influencer status got you and I an all-expenses-paid VIP trip to the Casino Royale Secret Cinema experience.
It did indeed, yes.
And as we're going up to Casino Royale next... If you're interested, listeners, we did a little Diminisode about it, and we talked about it, and we recorded ourselves at the event. You can get that by joining our Patreon, just $1 a month, and you get loads of extra content on there. Patreon.com/dimreturns. We do extra episodes and reviews of new releases. Obviously, that's not happening much at the moment, and other little things, quizzes and stuff. All sorts of stuff. $1 a month. Absolutely brilliant value for money.
We've just had 2 films getting reviewed before they even come out.
Yeah.
That's how
Peninsula,
ahead of the curve we are.
The sequel to Train to Busan, and
Yeah.
what was the other one?
Tremors Shrieker
Oh,
Island.
Tremors, Shrieker Island, Tremors 7.
So the big hits everyone wants to hear about, and by the time this episode actually comes out, both films will be readily available to the general public.
But we've reviewed them, they're there.
Yeah. So if you
What
feel like
witchcraft is this?
paying for the, if you feel like paying to rent one VOD, because it's right there for you now, go see if it's worth it by checking out our review. $1 could save you 9. $1 in time saves 9. With diminishing returns.